Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Small Success Podcast. My name is Pam Downing. I'm the operations and marketing strategist here at Larison Media. And you guys, I am so excited to bring you this interview today. I truly am. I personally am very excited. But before we continue, I want to introduce you to the people here in the studio with me. So first up, Drew Larison, my boss, my friend, my co-host. How are you, Drew?
Fantastic.
Glad
you're doing great.
Good. I'm so glad
yourself?
you're here. I mean, I'm doing great too.
Yeah.
It's a Thursday. It's a great day.
Yeah.
Okay, and I want to introduce you guys to our guest. We are here today with Amanda Foust. She is a high performance coach. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm great. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're really glad you're here. So let's dive right in. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about your background, and tell us a little bit about what you do as a high performance coach.
Yeah. So as far as my background, I started as a leadership student at Indiana Wesleyan University, and I got my bachelor's degree in leadership. And I really, really was fascinated with all types of leadership and really deciding how I wanted to be a leader and step into that. And I realized that the way that I wanted to do that was through running a coaching business, and that would eventually grow into something pretty big that I could lead other coaches and all of that. But first I needed to be a coach.
Sure,
get that
sure.
experience and all that. So as soon as I graduated, I went and got my certification in life coaching.
Okay.
And I started out coaching actually moms, because that was what kind of phase of life I was in then, and it's still the phase of life I'm in now, but that's kind of who I started coaching. And then it kind of naturally, organically morphed into CEOs and business owners.
Okay.
And when that started happening, I realized that my certification was not going to cut it for who I was coaching. It was a lot of mindset stuff, and people were coming to me wanting to grow their businesses and wanting to not just get help personally, but but professionally as well. So
Okay.
I realized then that I needed to go and step up my game a little bit, and I went and got certified as a high performance coach in the spring of last year.
Okay.
And that was all about high performers, high level people, and how to coach them to reach even higher levels for themselves personally and professionally.
Okay.
So the term life coach, business coach, it's blowing up. It's a lot of it right now. What does that mean to you? The word coach.
Yeah, so I would say a coach is just a guide to help you be the best version of yourself. Like I say, some people do a personal approach, but I like to pull in both personal and professional, and just figuring out okay, who are you? What is it that you do really well, and how can we amplify that and make it even better?
So tactically, what does that usually mean in your world when you're working with someone, being their coach?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Well, first it's a lot of self-discovery and just figuring out what are your strengths, what are your values, what do you love to do, and then how can we bring that into your everyday world. So a lot of times people like to separate the personal life and the professional life, and it's more okay, well, let's figure out how we can bring that into your profession and then help you grow your business. And so a lot of it's time management skills, but it's tweaking every single thing to that person as an individual. So it's not saying okay, here is a formula that you need to follow. It's saying, okay, here's a formula, but let's bring you as a unique individual and figure out how to morph that formula to work for you so that you can be successful.
Yeah, we talk a lot about self-awareness in our office as well as just on the podcast. How do you find that in someone, or the majority of people you work with? Are they self-aware, or are you working baseline nothing when you usually start with them?
I think that it's definitely become, since there's so many tools out there now for becoming more self-aware, I think that people start off with a little bit of knowledge. Back when I first started, there was nothing. It was all just I have no idea who I am. I have no idea what I'm good at. But now that there's podcasts and things that people listen to more, lots of books, things like that, I feel people do come with a little bit of knowledge, but they just need it pulled out of them. They need an outside perspective a little bit.
So those tools, are those the classic DISC assessments, Enneagram worlds, or is it something way beyond that?
It's beyond. I mean, that's a good place to start for people who might not have dove into self-discovery, but I have a lot of things I've developed as well, just through working with people, just creating a lot of different tools to assess them for, it's mainly asking questions. It's just knowing the right kind of questions to ask to get them thinking, because honestly, like, they deep down, everyone knows who they are. They know those things. They just may not know that they know. So when you ask them questions that force them to peel back those layers and to dig deeper, they're like, oh yeah, I actually have seen patterns in my life that show me X, Y, and Z, but I just didn't recognize it. And so it's trying to teach them to recognize those things and learning how to do that on their own, because ultimately, if you're being a good coach, they're not going to need you forever. They're going to learn how to use those tools and apply it to them outside of you.
Yeah. So you started off in, like you said, the mom niche world. What are some big differences you've seen compared to moms now working with like business owners and the individual?
Yeah, like the different, what do you mean exactly?
Well, just like the things you're coaching on, and then also just the individual. I don't know. I feel like business owners, they have like some natural DNA, and then that kind of makes them the right amount of crazy to do what they do, compared to just the individual compared to professionally. Like, what are you seeing in those people?
Oh, it's completely different. So like with moms, it was a lot of them not knowing who they are because they lost themselves in motherhood. And so I loved being able to help with that. With business owners, a lot of them don't want to start out with the self-discovery things. They're just like, help me make more money. Help me.
I'm paying for the service.
Productive.
Where's my ROI on that?
Exactly.
We get that. We never get that at marketing world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always have to like bring it back a little bit and be like, hey, that's the goal. Like, that's going to happen. But let's start with like where your mindset is, like where your satisfaction is in your life, where your relationships are, like all of those things. Because once those things we can get sorted, then the other stuff kind of just falls into place. And yeah, there are tools and things for me to help them with, but I noticed that they don't want to dive into like the deep mindset.
Interesting.
Things. Yeah.
You know, what we do as marketers is very different, but I'm hearing actually some similarities in the way that like when we onboard our clients, I won't get into all the nitty gritties, but we do ask some of those big questions.
Brand identity questions.
Yeah. And it's about their brand and their business, but for many business owners, that's personal. And what I've observed over the last handful of months is those are the questions that are more difficult to answer. You know, when we're asking about what you do and how you do it, easy, quick answers. But when we're asking like, well, why do you do that? Why did you make that choice? So there's some similar.
They're big questions.
Yeah. They are big questions.
And I think probably you'll see this in your world too. Like big questions get answered a lot later because they don't want to approach it because it is a big question. And it takes a lot more work to figure it out. And it's a big deal. Right.
Yeah. And I think often, and I'm sure you see this, I know we do, sometimes we're the first people who have asked that question. And so
it's crazy.
Forcing in a positive way, forcing someone to really stop and pause and think, oh, why do I do that? I don't know. I love pizza, so I open a pizza place. You know, like
it's crazy. Like we work with people locally, but also all over the country. But they're local people. I've lived in Kokomo my entire life, so some of the people we work with, I've known of since childhood. You know, so like in my head before I work with them professionally, I think so highly of them because they're like this big iconic brand to me in Kokomo. And then you sit down with them and you're like excited to talk business, and they're like, I never thought about that. So then you talk like the idea of a brand in general. I as the consumer knew their brand better than probably they did because they're such in like the dirt. They haven't spent a lot of time in the clouds, so to speak. But that's always just been fascinating to me. Yeah. Like I have an idea for their brand as a consumer for years, more than like they did actually running the business. And it's an interesting world.
Yeah. I remember back when like things started morphing in the direction of CEOs and business owners and these big wig people. I remember being like, well, who am I to coach them? Because I was like early on, and I was just like, I don't know if I don't know. I just was viewing them as like above where I was at since I was just starting my business, and they had these like multi-million-dollar businesses. And then I realized so quickly, like
they're people.
Yeah. And in that very first session of, the first session I do is just, it's called a discovery session. And it's what you guys are saying. It's literally just asking questions because I can't help someone that I don't know anything about. Yeah. And I can't tell you how many times there'd be like tears or like long pauses of just like them, their minds being blown by like a simple question. And I was like, okay, it's not even about me. They just need somebody to to care and to ask and to push them, and it's like, that's something that I don't have a problem with, is pushing these people outside of their comfort zone, and not just taking them, not letting them lead. Like when they say, kind of how I said earlier about them being like, well, I just want to make more money. I just want this. I don't let them do that. I'm not like, okay, well, let's just skip all this and jump to the end. It's like, no, we're gonna start here, and I'm gonna sit here till you're ready to answer, sort of thing. Yeah. And that really was crazy to me to realize that, like, we all are just people. And we all
we're similar in that way too, because when we ask, like, what are your goals with this, like, I think I always add the question, or add the statement, and you're not allowed to answer with just more money. Like, what else do you want from this? Like, because there's so many other things we can help bring them. Duh, you want more revenue. Like, what are the things in between those cracks, though, that you're looking for as well? Yeah. I mean, business owners we're a little crazy people. I always say, like, we're the right amount of crazy, to have these nuts ideas. And like what you're talking about is something we have a goal with this podcast, is like, I think you said, you ask a simple question that just no one's ever asked before. It can be a lonely world, being a small business owner, or just a business owner in general. Like, you're the owner, and no one really asks how you're doing sometimes, and asking the simple questions that you might ask will just break someone, because maybe they've owned a business for 25 years and no one has ever asked that question. Yeah. And I think we're really good at putting on a front. Someone might ask, how's the business? Great. Like, that's our classic Midwest answer. The Midwest, we're famous for asking, how are you? And it's always good, great, how are you? Business owners do that in a lot of ways too. I've started to change that. I've tried to answer the questions, there's ebbs and flows like always, but we're having a good time, and like, that's my step towards more of an honest answer sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, we're lonely people sometimes. Yeah. And we need to have those questions asked, and that's cool you're providing that for people. Yeah,
no, and to go along with that too, I think that a lot of business owners, depending on their teams, don't have people being honest with them. Their people want to please, they want 100%. To say the right thing. And so I remember one of my clients, he was like, nobody's ever pushed me like you have. Nobody's ever challenged me. Nobody's ever told me I'm wrong. Because I have to do that sometimes. That's not true in my world. That's why I said it depends on your team. But yeah, I think that that's something of value too, is just being like, well, what's your part in this? Like, what do you think you've done that may have caused this? And they're like, wait a minute. So I don't know. We had a situation, tiny situation, but like that yesterday. We were like taking a picture of something. And it was a boomerang actually. So it's a little more in depth. But we were taking a boomerang and we were literally debating on like what movements we'd be making for the boomerang. I said something and Pam's like, no, that wouldn't work. And one of the other employees was like, whoa, because you said no, or like push back on something. Right. And like, I think you were like, oh wait, is he mad? I'm like, by the way, in no way upset about what just happened. But what you're talking about, like, someone just told Drew no. And I'm like, I don't care. I think one of the coolest things I've ever been told is, if the business owner is the smartest person in the room, nothing's going to be working out. And like, that. If you have that attitude, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room, and a lot of people don't see it that way, but I don't want to be. That's good. I like that, actually.
So in your world, I'm honestly, I'm a lot more into this than I expected, because I didn't know anything about. Yes, it's such a big world, and life coaching. That's a big statement.
And you have a niche coaching business, and you've shifted your focus from one thing to another. And there are some similarities that are actually surprising for me to learn about from what we do to what you do. What I'm fascinated with is what we focus on is the entire small business. We work with small business owners, but we're working with the businesses.
The brand.
You focus on the individuals, and, the personal and professional. I'm with you. I agree. They go hand in hand. Who you are in your office, that's who you are at home. There's some differences in behaviors and habits probably, but, it's holistic. It's the whole person. And I love that you work with the individual, because you're right. Like, my strengths and weaknesses, very different from Drew's strengths and weaknesses. And so like some of the, like the big session type of events, those can be beneficial, but I would imagine not probably quite as effective as individual because you can't tell me when I'm in the audience with an audience of 1,000 people, like, how is that specific to me and my goals and my career choices and my small business or whatever the circumstance may be. So I'd love to hear you talk about the particular why you got into coaching. It sounds like, well, I know you're a natural leader. It sounds like that was your area of interest in college. What attracted you to coaching and that style of leadership? And how did that lead to you starting your business?
Yeah. Okay. So when I was at Indiana Wesleyan, I worked in the department that had life coaching.
Yeah.
So it was crazy because not a lot of schools, well, they may now, but then that wasn't like a thing. Like when I would talk to my friends at other universities, like, do you guys have a life coach? They're like, no, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But my university had that, and it was free for students. And I worked there as just like the front desk person, but I was able to work with all the coaches at the university and watch them and watch the transformations that were happening with students there and with faculty and all of that. And I was like, oh my goodness, I just love the impact that's being made. I just love going deep with people. I don't know how to have a surface level conversation, which I used to think was a weakness because I mean, you just used to, sometimes your strengths you view as weaknesses until you learn how to use them right. And so when I realized, like, actually I can have like in-depth conversations all the time as a coach, and I'm able to be pretty intuitive too with people. And so being able to have permission to voice those things.
Yeah.
Because if I'm just sitting with a friend and I'm telling them things that they could be improving in their life and all that, it's probably not going to go over very well.
You just become that friend.
Yes, I'm just that friend. So
Wanna grab lunch? No. All you do is yell at me.
Exactly. But if I'm like, somebody wants that in their life, it's a great job. So anyway, when I graduated, one of the coaches from the university ended up starting a coach training program. And she called me up for like the very first training and said, hey, I know you were really interested in this when you were here. Would you want to be one of the first ones to go through the program? And we had just adopted our first child, and I was pregnant with my second. And I was like, man, I really want there to be a way for me to like be home with the kids, but I definitely wasn't cut out for just being a stay-at-home mom. I think it's great for people who can. It just wasn't my thing. And I was like, but I do want to be home. So how can I do that? And I had already started a writing company, and that was going pretty well, but it wasn't enough to like, at the time it wasn't enough income to stay home. So I was like, well, I can jump in and try this thing. And they had us coaching from day one. Like when we walked in, they were like, all right, well, you have to have, I don't even remember how many hours, but it was a big amount of hours of coaching to complete the program. And I was like, who's going to hire me? Like, I'm not even certified yet. But we had to do it. So
dental hygienists have that as well. And it's always
Really?
funny to me. Yeah, they have to have so many hours during their school period of like cleaning their parents' or cousins'
Really?
teeth. I'm like, I don't know if I'd volunteer for that. You're learning, right?
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of where the motherhood thing started, was like, that's who I hung out with. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it was like, can I coach you? Can I do this? And then
Cool.
I thought like, oh, well, this is fun. This is what I'm going to do. And so then it just like, what was happening actually is that my writing clients were business owners. I was writing their like website copy and their emails and all like articles, all that stuff. They were like, wait, I heard you're a coach too. And I'd be like, yeah, and kind of tell them a little bit about it. And they'd be like, well, when we're done with our contract here, would you be interested in coaching me? And I was like, yeah, I mean, that'd be great. And then it just started, you know, I would coach them, they would tell somebody else. And it was pretty much an all referral based business for a while, until I finally decided to commit to that niche.
Cool.
The things you're talking about, the question I have in my head, where is the line between a life coach, career coach, all the coaches in the world, between that and like therapy?
No,
Where's
great
the
question.
line with that?
Yeah, so that's something we had to learn early on, because you really don't want to cross that
Yeah.
line.
Because that's a whole different certification.
Yeah.
And there's been lots of times I've had to tell clients in the middle of sessions,
You need a
like,
therapist.
that's not my thing. Yeah. So what I like to explain it is therapy is like healing from your past. And it's breaking down stuff that's happened to you in your past, all of that. And coaching is more like, okay, now that that's done, how do we move into
Where's
the
your future? Yeah.
So we're more of a future-based
But I'm guessing
Cool.
sometimes you have to like dig into the past.
Yeah, we
Right?
do, but there's still a line. If we're digging in the past to impact the future, then that's okay. If we're digging in the past to heal
Okay.
and to like deal with stuff like that, then that's not my forte.
Yeah.
Do you see?
Well,
do you,
that's an important distinction.
yeah.
No,
Do
I
you
got
see
that.
people? Does that happen a lot? Where
Yeah.
you're like suggesting a therapist as well?
I honestly think everybody could use both.
Sure,
I mean, a
yeah.
lot of
Yes.
at the beginning too of me coaching, I actually partnered with a lot of therapists where I would say, okay, when they're through with therapy, send them my
Yeah.
way, and vice versa. If I was coaching someone they weren't ready for coaching, I would send them their way.
Interesting.
So when I worked in Indianapolis, that's kind of how we did things.
Cool.
Yeah, because I'm curious about that. Where the line is, and because it is two different worlds. Yeah, but how you define that's good. Yeah.
And even sometimes I'll even get clients that come and have like marriage trouble, and that's another thing where I'm like,
Nope.
your wife and husband is not on the line right now. I
Yeah.
can help you with how you are in the marriage, and I'd love to help you with like that.
Because there's marriage coaches, I'm
But,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
but even that world, there's marriage therapists.
And I've done marriage coaching, but I don't do it unless they're both willing. And like I say, I'll work with the individual on their part in the marriage, but I'm like, I can't fix your wife or your husband over
Right.
over
right.
a session.
Yeah, for sure. So we know a little bit, excuse me, we know a little bit about your answer to this question, but what makes you as an individual, what makes you unique? Some of this is your business itself is a unique business, but what are some things that really distinguish you from other business owners?
Yeah. So I think one cool thing is that I'm able, like, since I do run two businesses, I've been able to kind of overlap them in some ways. So,
Yeah.
like with writing, when I did go through, like, switching into a different niche, I was able to, like, use my copywriting skills to, like, make sure I was attracting the right ideal client and messaging them and all of that. And then also just kind of how I was talking about with the overlap of like a lot of my writing clients will have me coach them later on. And so I think that's pretty a unique way to
That says a
run
lot about
business.
your writing services.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You know, that's a compliment to that. Because if they had a good experience with that, they'd be more interested in compared to like, it was okay, but I guess I'll let you coach
Right,
me. Like I
right.
can't
Maybe
see
you're a
that
better
happening.
coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see small business owners making that, but
Well, thank you.
yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of variables here. I'm just curious, how do clients find you? You mentioned a lot of referrals and word of mouth. Is that similar for us too? Is that kind of is that your bread and butter? Or I follow you online. I know you have a great presence. Do clients find you online, word of mouth? Are you getting
Yeah.
phone calls?
That's kind of another overlap. So I've written for like Huffington Post and Forbes and Inc.com and places like that, which let you have a byline and then you can say like what you do. And so I try to write like coaching related things on those
Sure.
platforms. And so a lot of people will find me through that. Like I have one post that is like I think it's 5 reasons why you shouldn't hire a life coach. And so people, when they're searching like about life coaching, they're like, oh yeah, I got to read that. Like this will talk me out of it. And then it ends up talking them into it. And then they find me at the
That's
end.
cool.
The old bait and switch.
Exactly. And that was like, I think 2015. I mean, that's been a long
Yeah.
time. And I still, because I always ask like, how'd you find me?
Yeah.
And that's still a common one. So
You got me.
Yeah.
That's how
Cool.
you got me.
it's funny.
Okay, so I'd love to hear you talk about some of the challenges that you face as a business owner, or just some of the challenges that you face in general with coaching, and what have you learned from those challenges?
Yeah, so I think that like the main challenge that I was going to discuss is that like when my niche changed, it was really hard for me because it was hard because I was used to it. I had in my mind, I'm going to coach these people. And this is like, I think it's really important to target an audience. And when you're targeting one audience and then your audience completely switches, it's like, okay, now how do I talk to these people? And am I even qualified to talk to these people? I had to deal with a lot of mindset stuff at first. And also, I had worked so hard on developing a platform to attract those people that I was like, now I'm going to have to start all over. And it was scary to want to like stop what I was doing and focus on making a new website and starting a new podcast. Like my old podcast, that my very first one was like not targeted towards high performers at all. And I'm like, well, now that that's who I'm coaching, I can't really be running this other podcast. So, I mean, I just felt like everything I'd worked for, I almost had to redo. and I was afraid to take time to do it. And that was a big challenge. But then when I finally was like, all right, I'm just going to take a month where I don't take on any more clients. I just serve who I have. And I just spend that extra time really making sure that my messaging is where it needs to be. My site looks the way it needs to be to attract high performers, all of those things. And it was definitely worth it, but it was a hard month to do all of that. And to
It's crazy.
like
It only took a month.
Yeah, well, and a lot of that was because I was slowly doing it before that, but I took a month to just like
that's all you
full
did.
on, yeah.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. And I'm still tweaking things here or there, but for the most part,
right,
it's ready.
It's always a process.
Yes.
So really the flip side of that question then is how have you seen success with your business? And when you do achieve those successes, how do you celebrate that?
Yeah, I loved that question. So one thing that, first of all, I love that you asked that because I don't think I've ever thought about that.
Oh, good.
We challenged the coach.
Yeah,
we challenge.
Bam, bam.
I love it because I was like, wow, like I have had success and I do need to think through that and celebrate it. So one thing was that I wanted to be with my kids until they were in school, and my youngest will be in kindergarten in August, and I've been able to be home with them during those years that they were home and running a business. And the other goal was to like replace my income, and I was able to make a full-time income with part-time work, and that's pretty awesome that I didn't even consider was awesome till I answered that question. But now I am full-time. I just started full-time this month, and it's perfect timing because that was my goal, was when my son goes to kindergarten in August, I want to be full-time. Sure. So it's a little bit early, so that's kind of another challenge of like balancing all that. But I definitely would say that's a success to be able to hit those goals, both financially and being able to be with my family.
Yeah. Yeah. And thinking about the ways in which you celebrate, because as of now, it's you, right? There's not, I'm sure you have a team of supporters around you, but employees wise, it's you. And so taking time to think about how am I successful? And then acknowledging that and celebrating that, that's important.
Exactly. Because in my writing business, I do have a few hires, and I'm pretty good about like when we finish with a client or we do something really great, I'm like, okay, let's celebrate. But when it's like you just said, and with my life coaching, it is just me, and I don't have somebody to be like, hey, this is something we're celebrating. And so it's just kind of on to the next. Yeah. And so I definitely want to be more intentional with that.
Cool. Well, and I imagine there's some natural celebration, like when you're working with a high performer and you see them achieve the thing that it was, the breakthrough. There's some natural celebration in that and acknowledging, but really that's a part of the process, and you're a part of that with the client. So very cool. So our podcast exists to serve small business owners. That's no secret. I'd love to hear you talk about what are some steps a small business can take that would lead them on the path to success, or if you have any advice or tips and tricks, thinking specifically about small business owners.
Yeah. So this kind of brings in the writing a little bit, especially since I just kind of revamped everything. But I work with fellow coaches Brian Dixon and Aaron Bridgman, and they're all about targeting your audience and what that looks like. And so my challenge to small business owners is to make sure that they're messaging the right people. I think so many times we have this broad view of like, I want to reach everybody, I want to impact everybody, I want to coach everybody. Whatever you're doing, you want to reach as many people as you can, but you actually reach more people the more you narrow in on who you're talking to and who you're messaging. So the way that I've heard it said before is like, if you have a dartboard in front of you, there's a bullseye, and that bullseye is like what you're aiming for. And if you're aiming towards the bullseye, you may hit around it, and that's fine because you're still on the target. But if you don't have a bullseye in front of you, you're just throwing darts everywhere, and it's not going to land wherever you need it to be. So something that I recently did was like, even be as specific as like, I made up a person that I target when I message. So like, not real, but I named her Charlotte, and she's like 36 years old, and she lives in San Diego with kids, and her biggest pains are balancing her own business that she has. She runs like a huge business that and a big team, and she feels like she isn't good enough for that, and she's not good enough as a mom, and she runs herself ragged, and she's not productive enough, like just feelings of being enough. She wants to make more money, she wants to take it to the next level, but she doesn't even have enough time. Like all of those things. So whenever I'm like doing a podcast or writing a post or doing anything like that, I always think, well, what does Charlotte need to hear? Or what's Charlotte going through right now that I could help her with? Or if I'm making a new resource, like what would help Charlotte? And that's really, really helped me attract people like Charlotte. And then, of course, like I said, with the dartboard, people around Charlotte, where it may be a man, it may be a different like job title, whatever. But I'm attracting those type of people because that's who I'm talking to.
That's what I call a buyer persona.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we use those too. Yeah. Charlotte the CEO or, you make up fun little names and titles.
Exactly. And that's really helped me because I did not do that before.
Yeah, I mean, really for any small business, I like that example because I feel like that can translate to anyone. You know, we've thrown out like the pizza place or, well, it may be true though. Everyone does want pizza. I don't know, but something that's a little bit more
and if
specific.
they don't, ew, we don't want them either.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's really, really cool. And I think like putting that intention and that energy behind that messaging and writing to Charlotte, like that's who you're attracting.
Yeah.
Really
Even
cool.
with business decisions, like when I was trying to decide if I was going to stop my old podcast and just stop or stop my old podcast and start a new one, or just like that whole decision, it was like, okay, well, what does Charlotte want? Does she listen to podcasts? Does she have time? What type of podcast would she want to listen to? Because my other one probably isn't going to target her, like all those. So she even helps with my decision making as well. So
That's really cool. I like that. So it's not.
You're a marketer, you know that?
Yeah.
a little bit.
It's not just messaging, it's decision making as well. Okay, cool. Anything?
Yeah, so like Pam was saying, so we work a lot with small business owners. And some of them listening right now might be on like the edge of like, do I need this? Describe that person who needs you, as a business owner. Like, where are they at in their business? Maybe even like revenue wise, or where what are they feeling probably on a daily basis where like, maybe I should look into this. What does that person look like? Or is the answer, if you own a business, you probably need a coach, but narrowing it down, like, what does that normal person look like where if somebody's listening, like, do I need this?
Yeah.
If they fit these buckets, what are those buckets?
I would say if you are maxed out right now, but yet you still want to hit that next level, but you're like, I don't even know how because I'm working like as much as I can be working, I'm doing as much as I can be doing. Like that's kind of their mindset is like they're burnout, but they still know there could be more. Somebody who may be wanting to like change their habits where they're like, okay, I've been in this rut for a long time, even if it's outside of their business. Maybe it's a personal habit that they're like, I just can't seem to break this. I know it's not right, but I don't know how to stop it. And they need like somebody to help hold them accountable, offer them support, teach them even like the science behind a habit and like how to change it.
And the power of it.
Yeah.
Habits are insanely powerful,
exactly.
Good or bad.
Exactly. And how that impacts that. That's one of those things too, where a personal habit's going to impact how you are professionally too. So that sort of thing. And just someone who is wanting, like I say, that next level, but they don't know how to get there. And they've tried, all these different ways on their own. And they're ready for somebody to come in and just challenge them and call them out in a loving way.
Yeah.
But yeah, just call them to better because I truly see my clients for like the best version that they can be. I do meet them where they're at, but I don't let them stay there. So.
Let's talk about the word busy.
Yeah.
Because it's such a interesting topic and word, especially in the business owner world where, I see it all over. We're like, maybe it's Americans, maybe it's just humans in general. Like we're taking such pride in being busy so much that I feel like we often lie to ourselves about how busy we actually are. And we put ourselves in that rut of like, I'm working so much, but then reality, are you? Because Do you see that a lot? Is that a trend, or is that just something I'm seeing?
No, I love that you say that, because that's one of the first things we do when we do start getting into the business stuff is I have them do like a time inventory where they write down everything they're doing. And then I talk to them about like what are like the most important things in your business? Like, does your time that you're spending in your business reflective of like what are the most important things in your business? Like, because a lot of times they're not the same.
Yeah.
They'll put their time into something that's a little bit easier or something that maybe they could delegate. Like, and we just kind of go through everything that they're doing. And then also figuring out, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the EOS system, but it talks a lot about, like, the importance of having rocks in your business. Like, what are the main important things that you need to do to be able to reach your goals, like your business goals? Because a lot of times you've probably heard this story, but like if you have a jar and you fill it with like the sand and the pebbles and all that, and then you try to fit your rocks in at the top, it's not going to be full. But if you put the rocks in first, it all starts to fit, and then you can pour water and all that stuff. But basically, that's not how business owners are naturally. Like, unless they've done a lot of work, they're not focused on their rocks. And so we talk about like, what are your rocks and where are you spending your time in accordance to that? And just trying to do like time inventory in that way.
I see, because we work a lot in the small business area, and I see so many small business owners really struggling with the idea of delegating. And I don't know maybe somebody's put this in their head where like, you're the business owner, you have to do everything. This is your baby. And it's just not true. You know, I think in reality, it's not true that's the reality of what's possible. Do you see that as well? Like people really struggling to delegate. Maybe it is, tasks that like they care a lot about, but then there's also tasks that like are so little that somebody else could be doing, right. But I don't know if it's a pride thing where like they have a hard time, or maybe they just are really bad at asking people to do things. Yeah. Delegation is a huge issue, I think, in the small business world.
And we talk when that gets brought up, because it does, because you're right, it is a big issue. We talk about the mindset of like, what is it? Like, why can't you do it? And we dig really deep into that. And then a lot of times, small business owners will have me do like a strengths assessment with their team. And then I can help them see, like, actually, this person's really good at these things, and you're really good at these things, and, like, help them delegate accordingly, because I feel like when they have evidence that that person actually can succeed in those things, then they're more likely to delegate.
Yeah. I screw up a lot of things. I am in no way perfect, but one thing I am proud of what I've done owning a business is before I started, I observed a lot of small business owners just secretly. And that's one thing I watched a lot, especially in the restaurant world, I feel like. I'd be sitting somewhere for lunch, and the owner would be going nuts, making food, taking orders, doing all this stuff. I'm like, you have like 8 people working for you right now, and they're not doing, and I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want that nuts world where I feel like I have to be doing everything. But I feel like that's something people really struggle with. And I don't know if it's the world has told them that like that's what it is. If you own a business, this is the life. You're running around ragged and like killing yourself, thinking you have to do everything. But it's a big issue I see, especially with clients too. Like a lot of people, maybe they were doing their marketing before, and the idea of hiring us is just nuts to them. But then they work with us like, oh my gosh, I have so much time now.
Why didn't I do this before?
Yeah, or like the stress of like, oh crap, it's Tuesday, I should post something. Like that's gone from there, all that stuff. But that's a huge issue I see with clients and other just small business owners, and something I observed a lot before I started my own business.
Yeah, and teams want to be trusted. Like when that guy that
the empowerment
saying, is like cooking and doing all that, the team, all they feel like is, well, obviously they don't trust me to do it, or obviously I'm not good enough, and so then they're going to show up that way. Yeah. And so when business owners are telling me their employees aren't happy and they're not showing up well and they're not doing their job, it's like, well, what are you doing to help them?
You're not empowering
be that
them.
way.
Yeah, trust is a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said about the strengths assessment too with the team, because I think there's a lot of layers to that. Like, I'm wearing my busy badge with honor, and like I'm proud of the fact that I'm so busy. And some of it is probably a little bit of history. Like a lot of small business owners, they start out as a team of one. And so out of necessity, they've always had to do all the things, literally. And so as they grow, the things that are important for them are harder to delegate, or the things that they're just naturally good at. Or there may be a level of like they've gotten burned. You know, they have delegated something
And it didn't work out.
And it didn't work out. Maybe it was they delegated the wrong thing, or maybe the team member that they delegated to wasn't the right person. They should have let this other team member take responsibility. So,
which that's like I hear that because that's totally true. They get, well, I let you do it that one time, you screw it up. So I mean, in my head, that's a lack of patience.
Sure.
And if I would say that to someone, my head would be like, that's on me though. I didn't train them well enough.
That's 100%. I was going to say that shows more about the leadership than the person.
Yeah. I think sometimes to a fault, I put it all on me no matter like what situation is happening. But yeah,
Sure.
but it always there's always a valid reason behind it. That's my fault, you know?
As we wrap up here, we have kind of one signature question that we ask every podcast guest, and I'm really curious about your answer. We are the Small Success Podcast. So I'd love to know, what is one small thing that you do that has contributed to your success?
Yeah, so I naturally have like a creative brain and a strategic brain, and I'm not as organized. And so one thing that's really helped me with my success is it's actually called a high performance planner. It's on Amazon. It's made by Brendan Burchard, who is the guy who trained me. Yeah, he made this planner that is for like specifically high performers. And the reason why I love it is because it has like on the left side, it has a morning mindset exercise. And so you answer questions that just gets you in the right mindset. Like, for example, today I knew I had this, and one of the things on the morning mindset was like, who do you need to show up really well for today? And I was like, I need to show up really well for the podcast that I'm doing. And then that helps me like think it through. Well, what does that look like? How do I show up well? You know, and so it gets me in the right mindset. So I'm not just like, living in reactive mode all the time where I just am showing up to the next thing and reacting to what's going on. It's preparing me. Then at the top, it has like, what are the 3 most important things you need to get done today? Because it's more important to focus on the 3 most important things than it is a really long to-do list. And so it has me do that, but then it also has the to-do list as well, but it just makes sure you're focused on the 3 most important. And then on the right-hand side, it has like an evening reflection where it just asks like, how could I have shown up with more courage today? How could I have been more productive? The morning one talks about like who's someone I can influence today. But it's just like, it's making you think of like your influence, your productivity, your courage, your whether or not you have clarity, necessity, like all these important things that high performers need to think of. It forces you into that every day, and it helps keep you organized as well.
Wow.
So
I've heard that name.
Yeah.
I've heard about this, but I'm really interested to check it out. We will.
You're a notes person.
Yeah, I'm totally a notes
Yeah.
I
person.
brought it with me if you want to see it. After
Oh,
this.
cool. Okay. Well,
We'll put a link to that.
yeah, we'll
too.
put a link
Yeah.
to that in the show notes, so you can check it out. But I love that. And so is that something that you've used for years? Do you use that every single day?
Yeah, so I've used it for about 2 years now. I am not perfect, so I haven't used it every day, but the days that I don't, I notice.
Yeah. Interesting.
I get to the end of the day, I'm like, what was off today? Like, what was going on? And then the next morning when I go to do my planner, I'm like, oh, I didn't fill this out yesterday. And it's like, I can tell.
That's common with any sort of thing that like takes discipline. You hear people say if like they're exercising all the time and they miss the day, they feel off. You know, like you yelled at me because I don't make my bed the other day, and you're like, don't you know that's like the first thing you do and you succeed in the morning? Like, I bet if you didn't make your bed, you would feel off that morning or something like that. Anything that takes discipline, if you are good with it for a long time and you miss a day, you feel it like throughout the rest of the day.
Well, to even take it a step further, one other reason I love it, because I make my clients use it because I'm like, I know how valuable it is. And
Cool.
but they have like at the end of every week, they have like a scorecard. And so it scores you on how you showed up and the habits that you like personally want to have. And then, like I said, the areas of clarity, necessity, influence, courage, and productivity, it scores you on that too, because you score yourself every day, and then it adds them up at the end of the week, and then it asks basically how you can improve the following week. And so it's a really good way for me as a coach to see the progress in my clients, because if our numbers aren't rising, then I'm not doing my job. So and then also sometimes clients can like get so, and it's a hard thing to be a client. There's a lot of work that you have to do and a lot of discipline and stuff. And so it's really neat for them to be able to see the numbers and celebrate them. Like, oh wow, I actually am like improving. This is hard, but it's worth it. Let's keep going.
That's an interesting, we talked about successes in the top of the podcast and how you celebrate. Twist that around a little bit. I think it's valuable. When your clients have successes, how do you celebrate with them?
Yeah. I mean, we honestly, sometimes I dedicate full calls just to celebrate, and we just walk through like where they were before and what that was like and where they're at now. And like, and then I challenge them, like, what are you going to do today to celebrate that? And they have to choose something, and then I hold them accountable to it and ask them how it was. So, I mean, I'm a lot better with my clients on that than I am.
Aren't we all? Yeah. Yeah. No, but in a way, like that celebration for your client is a celebration with you too, because you had something to do with that.
That's true.
Yeah. I think, it's the habit of the journal. It's the discipline of it, but it's probably that mental shift too. Like
it's intentionality.
Yeah. It's being intentional, and, in the best way, you're forced to think through all those areas that you mentioned and, how beneficial that is. The other thing I love that aligns exactly with what you do is that it's future focused. And it's for like, it feels progressive. Like each week you're getting to score, or just reflect back, but then think about how that moves momentum into the future. So it's really cool.
It even asks on there, like, what would a high performance coach tell you today? And then I have to I have to think about that. Like, oh, what would they say if I had to,
do you have
like,
a coach?
go? I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. She's not a high performance coach, but she is,
a life coach.
Yeah. She's a life coach and business coach. So
gotcha.
I think every coach should have a coach.
I keep thinking, I know you we're trying to wrap it up. I keep thinking of more questions.
I know. Let's continue.
Like I said, I'm surprised. I'm like so much more interested in this than I had expected. Awesome. So another idea I think that's sold heavy in the entrepreneurial small business world is the idea of like perfection and what that looks like. And a lot of people probably come to you, I need a coach to help me be more perfect. What is your view on the idea of perfect? What's a perfect business? What's a perfect business owner? Or do you even teach that?
Yeah.
What's that whole world of perfection?
That's a hard one. So I don't
Sorry.
believe. No, it's good. I just mean like it's hard for me to help people with that because it is such a mindset of like I want to be perfect and I'm not perfect yet. So like, what am I missing? I don't believe in perfection, but I do believe that everybody can like become a better version of who they are. And so a lot of times I'll say like if they have a certain goal of like what they view as perfect, it's like, well, is that true, or is that like, I guess what I'm trying to say is they think that they need to be a certain way, and it's normally because somebody else they know is that way. And so I'm like, is that true for who you are? Like if you really were that way, would you be living true to who you are? And a lot of times the answer is no. So it's like, okay, you may have this idea of perfection because you look like this person or have a business like this person, but will you be happy? And when they can put themselves in that position, because I do a lot of visualizations with my clients, and a lot of times if that's a question, I'll say like, if you were that person, if your business looked exactly like that, and we talk about if that actually brings happiness or not. And so when they're able to realize like it doesn't, and it's just all the idea of it is more appealing than actually living
and
it.
Happiness is such a term too in our world. Like, what the heck is happiness? And figuring that out. Something I will admit I have a flaw of, and my wife will point it out frequently. I have a hard time being like fully satisfied with things. That there was always the joke that that song in Hamilton like is solely about like my attitude at life. I am never satisfied. Yeah. Advice on that?
Well, I was about
because I can't be alone, and like it's kind of around the idea of perfection, and like, is it setting small goals and hitting those? But even that's such a mindset thing of like, because I feel like me never being satisfied, I have no idea what it would look like for me to be satisfied. I don't even know what that benchmark is. So I'm like going towards something that I don't even know. But I feel like that's probably common as well in the business owner world.
Yeah, and I think that's why clarity is one of the first things that I do with my clients, because if you are aiming towards a direction you don't even know, like if you can't even tell me what would make you happy, then you're not going to find it.
Yeah.
And so it's just like one of the first things is like, okay, let's get really clear on the direction you're going so that we can set goals around that so you can find fulfillment along the way. And this is just a random question, but are you familiar with the Enneagram?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you a type 3 then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nailed it.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of that too is just really studying that and being like, okay, when I feel this way, am I living in like a healthy version of myself, or am I in the unhealthy? And if I'm in the unhealthy, how can I get back to me?
Well, what's hard in my head, I want that answer to be perfection is what would make me satisfied. But then also in the back of my head is like, I fully know that doesn't exist.
Right.
So then I'm constantly chasing something that doesn't exist.
Yeah. And
We're going to pause and have a therapy session.
I know, I'm like, okay, I can't go into this right now.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm like, yeah.
But I'm fully aware
I
of
work
it.
with
At least
a
I'm aware
lot
of
of
that.
type 3s because a lot of type
Yeah.
3s are business
We're the
owners.
worst.
That's why I'm like, I know you're not the worst. It's just you're the hardest to satisfy.
Sorry, honey, if you're listening to this. And my children probably too.
Well, and those, I mean, you bring up a great point about like where you start with some of those questions of clarity and goals. I know many 3s, and I am not a coach, but I imagine like that really can be a game changer when a 3 or a business owner, well, let's just say business owner, when a business owner has to verbalize or write out and get specific. Well, what is that goal for you?
Yeah.
Why is that your goal?
It's also goals for my employees too.
Sure.
And, like, I totally assume, well, it's setting expectations for employees.
Yeah.
I totally assume, why wouldn't their expectations be what mine are? And that's that never existing perfection.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like me having to actually come up with expectations and verbally say them instead of just assuming they're the exact same as mine, but then nobody knows what mine is because it's this fairy tale world. You know?
I also think you came at that question with that it's like a negative thing to like be striving for more. And I think it can be in some ways, but I also think it's really positive to be that way. And I think we need people in the world like that, because if we didn't, nothing would get better and nothing would grow.
Yeah.
And I think being able
Let's
to
expand
look at
on
it
that. Like the good part of
and the fact that you recognize it is great. But I think when you were explaining that with the goals, I know that like if I don't fill out my planner with my top 3, then I can do 100 things during the day, and I get to the end and I'm like,
what did I do?
I don't feel like I did anything. I'm not satisfied, because I'm a strong type 3 wing. So I'm actually a type 4, but the type 3 is very strong in me.
I'm 3-4.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so I'll get to the end and be like, oh man, this was a terrible day. I didn't do anything. But then like if I actually filled it out and I have all my stuff like visually in front of me of what my, like, very clear, then I'm like, oh, check that. Oh, I got that done. I got my 3 rocks. Wow, it was a good day. And I feel like way better about it.
Yeah.
Of course. And when I'm doing my evening reflection, I already have plans to make the next day better. But like, it's not in a way that was like, oh, today was terrible, I need to do better tomorrow. It's more just like, wow, I've gotten to this point, now I can grow even more tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's just changing like the language you use, instead of like, I'm always trying to do better, I'm never content. It's more like, I'm always striving for growth, and I reach that, and like I'm becoming a better person each day. Like just changing that story in your mind can really impact how you feel about it.
Yeah, because like I even just talking about that planner in my head, I'm like, oh, I would never do that. I could never find discipline in myself to have that and like write it in every day. But I know it would probably be insanely beneficial.
Yeah.
to
But
actually
even
do
then, like, I mean, I don't like it either. I just said I wasn't organized.
Yeah.
But like telling yourself, like, I may not like it any day that I do it, but I'm like while I'm doing it, but telling yourself like it would really help, and I can benefit from it, and I can do it. I am disciplined enough. Just changing that language a little bit.
Fine.
Anyway.
Pam's like, this is awesome.
This is the best thing ever. Well, and I mean, I feel a little bit like a broken record, but the importance, and I'm learning this like personally, the importance of clarity in goals, and the difference between saying, you know, oh, I'm trying to think of an example that's like, okay, personally, like I want to make more nutritious choices with my eating. Well, that's really open-ended and vague. And shifting that to like, I will eat vegetables at every meal, or like, I don't know, maybe it's as specific as like, I will eat cucumbers every day at lunch, or like, I don't know. I'm making a really broad example here, but when thinking about this planner, when you see the 3 important things for the day, for someone who is constantly striving for this like mythical perfection, which we all know logically that doesn't exist. But if it's just like, I want to be better, I want to do better, I want this big thing. Well, when you don't know what that big thing is, of course you never feel a sense of satisfaction. Of course you feel like this continuous yearning for this pie in the sky idea. Well, when you have that discipline, and even if you don't enjoy it, you're being forced to look at like, you know what? I accomplished those 3 important things today. This was a great day. There was growth here, and it's measurable. That is a huge shift.
Yeah,
Something like everything you're saying. I'm like, sometimes I think what I do, I think it just happens too. It's not even intentional. If I want to stop doing something or continue doing something, I take away the things I don't want to do as even options in my life.
Yeah.
I remove them as even options. But honestly, when I do that, it kind of makes it harder to celebrate when I'm realizing I'm not doing those things anymore, because it's not like I overcame it, because mentally I told myself like, no, those aren't even options anymore. So why would I celebrate not doing something that wasn't even an option? You know? So it's getting real deep now. Yeah. So, but in my head, oh, that's a good strategy. But like long term, like, yeah, but then you don't celebrate it because you just removed it even from being an option.
Sure.
It's like a ridiculous idea that I would do that, because it's not even an option on the table.
But even like in that situation, so sometimes like habit charts can be good, because like you can even write down, I'm just making something up too, but like if it's not having sugar or something, you can write down like, didn't have sugar today, and check it off, because then it's like, oh, I did that. Because I try to do 3 to 5 new habits every couple months or so. Sometimes the same one stays on for a long time because it takes me a while. But like just having that scorecard of something, like I say, my brain does not work in scorecards, organization, discipline. Like that is not how it works. But like that is the only time that I actually feel like I make progress, is when I do it that way. So it's worth putting the time into it, even just for the satisfaction. My mom's told me from day one, she's like, you're just never content. You're never content. And I used to, I mean, that's kind of where the changing your mindset thing happens, is because I've had to do that, because I used to think it was such a bad thing, which again can be in some ways. But I also was like, I think it's great that I push myself to grow, which she sees that now too, because how am I going to push other people to grow if I'm not doing it? And you as a leader, how are you going to push your team to grow and become better if you're not that way? So like viewing it as a strength too.
Well, just in general too, I love what you're saying about like people, I'll use myself specifically, but like it's easy to have this internal narrative or this dialogue that's like, I'm not disciplined, I'm not organized, so therefore I could never do a journal, or like I could never do the growth chart. Well, actually, you can. It may be harder for you than it would be for someone who has that natural bent towards organization or goal setting or whatever it is. But that's not true. Like, not that we lie to ourselves. I don't know. Maybe we do.
It's more like I'm capable.
Yeah.
So you don't have to say I'm not going to lie to myself and say I'm disciplined, because I'm not, but I'm capable of discipline. You know?
Yeah.
Or I'm not driven. I'm capable of being driven, and all those things. Yeah. No, that's really good. Yeah. One change of a word.
Writing these down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. Being capable. I mean, that's a huge shift.
Something I do
thinking
too.
That way.
This is like becoming I'm putting it all out there. I have a hard time not going like full force. I'm a hobbyist of heads of I love learning a little bit about a lot of things. But like when I find something like, oh my, I'm going full force at it, which is a 3 thing. But I think a weakness of that, or something that could cause not great things for that, is I think there is powerful in setting small goals. So for example, if I bought this notebook and like I went full force at it, probably what I should do is like one segment on that paper. My goal is first, like just do one segment of that, instead of like, because then I just it's so much change so quickly that I'm just like, nah, not gonna do it. But like I have a hard time like setting those small goals because I want to go full force at it. But it's something I should probably do better. Like if I want to start eating healthier, maybe tackle one bad thing at a time. Not like all I'm eating is broccoli.
Yeah.
No more anything.
No, that's so good. I always tell my clients to think of like the 5 steps it's going to take to get to that goal.
Yeah.
Like I call it the 5 power moves. So like what do those look like? When you get one power move down, you move to the next one, because if you're just trying to, like you said, jump full force, more than likely it's going to fail. And so it's like being able to break it down into the 5 power moves can be really good.
Just, and like set them up as like a snowball effect too, you know?
Totally. Well, your one small thing actually turned into be one very big thing, which is awesome. I love learning about this resource. We'll link this over on the podcast notes. If you're listening, swipe up. If you're viewing this on YouTube, you can see this in the show notes below. But Amanda, seriously, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. We really learned a lot. I know that some of the tools that you brought will be really useful to small business owners. I will link everything about High Performance Insider, how you can find Amanda, your website, your socials. I'll link all of that in the show notes as well. And as always, you can find us over at LarrisonMedia.com or any social media platform. Thanks so much for listening. We will see you next time.